How many people have seen Scriptcs before or have maybe heard about it the last couple of days during some talks? Cool. Scriptcs is a project that I really enjoy using, and I like to share it with people either by user groups or conferences like this, hopefully to kind of expand the reach and maybe convert a couple people over to using it. So I'm really happy to be here and sharing Scriptcs with you today. A little bit about me. I'm at Ryan Rousseau on Twitter. I am a Scriptcs enthusiast. You can find some contributions I've done on GitHub. I work for a company called Praxis out of Shreveport, Louisiana. If you're wondering about the picture, I logged into Facebook this morning, and using their memories on my timeline, they kindly reminded me that I broke my leg 3 years ago today, which I think was their way of saying, good luck on your talk. Break a leg, right. So what is Scriptcs? Number one, it's awesome. It allows you to use C# as a scripting language. So you get a REPL, and then you can write code in C# as a script, similar to like Python or Ruby, and execute it without having to use Visual Studio or something else. And that in itself is just enough for me to say it's awesome, because I come from, like when I was in college, I used to write a lot of Python, some Perl, a little bit of Perl, more Python. So I really love scripting languages. And whenever I first heard about Scriptcs and found out that I could do scripting with C#, I was really excited to find out more. Scriptcs also has some influences from other scripting languages. So you'll see maybe some things you've seen in Ruby if you've played around with Ruby a little bit. You'll see a lot of influences from Node. A little bit more about Scriptcs is the community around it is also really awesome. They're really welcoming to newcomers. You've heard in the last couple of days, maybe somebody mentioned upforgrabs.net, which is a website where you can find open source projects that have issues labeled for newcomers to take or open to community contributions. Scriptcs does this with You Take It. So if you see issues labeled as You Take It, you can come in and work on an issue and get that code contributed into the project. How I came into contributing to Scriptcs was I was doing a preparation for a presentation for my user group about 1.5 years ago, and I wanted to show off a feature that I had read about in the documentation, and I couldn't get it to work. And I tried for a while to actually get it to work until I finally thought it must be a bug. I pulled down the source and did a little bit of research, and a couple hours later I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can call this a bug. And it was kind of daunting to me to actually go to someone else and say, I found a bug in your code. That seems like, how do you approach that delicately? I was kind of worried that, you know, not being in open source before, that may have been like a negative interaction with them. But it actually wasn't. It was very, very positive. I ended up going to the Jabber chat room and talking with Christian, one of the developers, and said, hey, I think I found a bug. This is how, what I've tried. This is how I reproduce it. And he comes back a few minutes later. He says, yes, that's definitely a bug. And the next thing he said was, do you want to fix it? And that was very like inviting and empowering for somebody. Like, I mean, I'd never talked to him before. I'd never contributed to an open source project before. But to have that attitude of, you found something, would you like to help us out and fix it? It was very, very welcoming. So you'll see throughout the project that they've had contributions from multiple people, 55 contributors if you're looking at GitHub. But not only that, they have extensions and tools authored by other people in the community that haven't maybe made code contributions to the actual project, but they've written script packs or extensions or install tools. And the other thing you can see in the community is actually people blogging about it or coming to conferences and speaking about it and sharing Scriptcs with other developers. And Adam mentioned in his keynote yesterday about how it's not hard to get involved in open source. It's easy to go in and make that pull request. He showed it in his talk. Jake also talked about how getting involved isn't that hard to do. And that's a message that I think as speakers at an open source conference, we really should be sharing, but we should also take this opportunity to be involved in other ways like blog posts and speaking. So maybe you saw something at .NET Unboxed that you are interested in, you want to learn more about, and you take that back to your local user group or a local regional conference where you are, and maybe you talk about Storyteller, or you talk about Shoodly, or Read the Docs, or Scriptcs. and become involved in that community and expand the .NET open source ecosystem. So why would you want to use Scriptcs? You've probably heard a couple things, especially in the Omni Sharp talk, frees you from Visual Studio. There's been this theme at the conference of maybe getting away from Visual Studio and using your favorite editor. Like I want to use Atom or Visual Studio Code or Sublime Text. It also plays well with Omni Sharp, so you can get the Kotlin style information and IntelliSense in your Scriptcs scripts through Visual Studio Code or Atom. One thing that I really, the most of the time when I'm using Scriptcs, what I'm using it for is to try out something new in .NET that maybe I haven't worked on before. I found out about a new NuGet package, something like Humanizer or Shoodly that I heard about yesterday. And I just want to pull it down. I can pull it down and start playing with it and exploring how that library works without creating a new solution and creating console application number 34 that just kind of sits in my folders and to never be touched again. I can just create a script or open an editor or the REPL and start using that library and exploring it and figuring out if it's something that I can use in my day-to-day work. You can also script and automate certain tasks with C#. So if you're used to using PowerShell for scripting automation, I try to do that, and I do it about once a year. And PowerShell is really nice, but I just tend to forget it in between usages. And because I use C# every day with Scriptcs, I can use something that I'm familiar with to write automation tasks and automation scripts that I hopefully won't be forgetting in between uses. So I did mention a REPL. So the REPL is, if you're not familiar with it, it's a read, eval, print loop. So it's going to read input from you, evaluate it in the context of the language, and then print the display back to you. And it's going to do that in a loop. I have mostly screenshots up here just to kind of like save time bouncing back and forth demos. I'm going to do some demos. I'm actually going to jump into the REPL and demo in a second. But if I get to something and you want to see it more in depth and I kind of skip over it and go into the next slide, just wave your hand, I'll jump back into it. Most of these demos will still run. So with the REPL, you can just open up a command line and start typing C#. I can type in a console.writeLine to say hello world. I can create Lambda expressions and save them into variables and then execute them later. I can actually write full classes and use those inside the REPL. And if you're like me and you're clumsy typing, which is another good reason I have screenshots here because I don't want to clumsily type in front of everybody, you can also use the reset command and the clear command to reset the state of your REPL. So I've got the REPL open, so I can just type some words here. Cool. So now I've got a variable called bar. I can do all the same stuff that was in the screenshot, but also some extra things that you can do inside the REPL are what they called REPL commands. So if I run :help, so colon is the start of a REPL command. If I run :help, it'll actually give me a list of commands that I can then run. So I can change directories, I can clear the output of the screen, I can exit the REPL. I can actually install packages from NuGet here, so I don't have to do that as a separate command. I can, from inside the REPL, install Newtonsoft or AutoMapper. What you can also look at is a list of references. So these are assemblies that have been included in your script session automatically for you. And this is something that Scriptcs does for you. You don't have to go in and add references to system or core or data, and also adds in the references for Scriptcs automatically. And you can add more references if you need to with the $R process or $R and then the assembly name. You can also check using statements. So what namespaces do I have in my REPL session that I can use? So if I was to add something more in, say system.text.regular expressions. Is it singular or plural? Singular. I always mess that one up. But if I wanted to go back and now clear this, I could say reset and then check my references again. And you'll see it be gone. You can also see the state of your variable, so any variables you have. Normally foo would have shown up here, but I reset my REPL, so it's now gone. So that's the REPL in a nutshell. Anything you can do with Scriptcs C# coding, you can do it inside the REPL. And you notice I didn't have a namespace and a class wrapping my code. It was just C# code as a scripting language. Now, if you're like me and you type clumsily and you would end up using reset over and over and over, you can just break into a text editor and write this as a script file. And C# script files end with the extension .csx. You can run it from the command line, or you can run it inside the editor if there's support for it. I know Sublime, Atom, and Visual Studio Code, it's very easy to get set up to actually execute the scripts files from the text editor. And there's a lot of extra options you can do alongside that. You can cache script compilations for later execution. So if you don't want to have to compile your script every time, you can use the -cache flag, and it'll just run the same compiled assembly every time. You can also pass arguments to the script. So I have a simple example script here for creating an API key based on a customer name and what environment the API key belongs to. So you see, running it from the command line, you can just call Scriptcs and the name of the script. It'll give you back some output, hello.net unboxed, anything that you have printed out. If I want to call my keygen script, I can just pass that. And then if you want to use some of the flags, so you could use -cache or -- and then arguments to the script. Now it looks kind of funny here because I actually have two sets of -- and that's a bug currently in running it from PowerShell. If you ran it from CMD, you would only need one set. I discovered that getting these slides to work. So just a quick example of that. So if I want to run Scriptcs and then my keygen, and we'll just do Unboxed, and we are running in production. So this should run and give me an API key that I could use in my application that I need an API key for. All right, so that's the basis of what you would think of with Scriptcs and a scripting language. So it's a REPL, and I can run scripts. That sold me on it real quick, because like I said, I really like Python and other scripting languages. I love the idea of doing C# in a scripting style. So hopefully I've sold you on at least trying it out. And there are a few different ways you can install it. If you're on a Mac, you can use Homebrew. So you can say brew install Scriptcs. On Windows, you can use cinstall, chocolatey install Scriptcs. But the best way to install it is using SVM, which is a member of the community, Paul Bauer, actually wrote this tool, and it's the Scriptcs version manager. So using SVM, I can actually list out the versions I have installed on my machine. And then I can actually switch between them. So if you see next to 0.15.0, which is the latest version, it has a little asterisk. That means that's the version I have running right now. I can also just run a command to say, oh, I want to use dev latest, which is a neat feature for SVM, which is I pulled the Scriptcs code down from GitHub, I've built it, and I want to use that version. So I can easily swap between the live production version of Scriptcs and my local dev copy of it. Or I can swap back to an older version if I want to do some testing. And if you look at SVM install -L, it'll give you a list of all possible options that you can download. So you can go all the way back to version 0.10. All right, so there is more to it. It's not just a REPL, and it's not just running scripts from the command line or from a text editor. You can do a lot more with Scriptcs. There's actually package management built inside of it. So if you want to pull down libraries from NuGet or Packet, if you're using the Packet extension, you can do that. There are multiple ways for code sharing and reusing code. It's also extensible. You can swap out different pieces internally from Scriptcs. And there's actually a hosting layer that you can use to make your application scriptable using Scriptcs. So we're going to run through a couple of those examples. Installing script dependencies is actually pretty easy. If you're in the command line, you just have to run Scriptcs, clear here for you. You just run Scriptcs -install, and then the name of whatever NuGet package you want to install. So let's use Newtonsolve JSON. So it's going to go up to NuGet and hopefully pull down some packages into the local folder. and actually puts these packages in, instead of packages folder and packages.config, they're named specially scriptcs packages, scriptcs packages.config, but they're the same format as what you're used to. So it's just got Newtonsoft there, and it's installed in my packages folder. If I start the REPL, another thing that Scriptcs does for you is any DLLs you have in that script packages folder for you, it'll include that in your script session for you. You don't have to manually add that reference. So if we look at references in this REPL session, you'll see the last one is the path to newtonsoft.json that I just installed from NuGet into my local folder. And then I can just easily say using newtonsoft.json, and if I spell it right, it should load fine. And now I can actually start hacking away at Newtonsoft using C# as a scripting language. Now, there's actually an interesting bug with this right now. If I use reset, which we saw a little bit earlier, was the reset command for the REPL. Yes, question?
Yeah, I was curious. So it obviously it's looking in a local directory for the Scriptcs packages, but is there a way to also have Scriptcs locate some sort of global directory that you can persist across any of your REPL sessions?
There is a global directory that's used for modules.
Yeah, there's a global directory, but it won't load. It will load. You see that as a way to do extensibility of Scriptcs.
Okay.
It's not recommended. Like, we've really gone with kind of the model of like node of just installing packages that you need locally. The advantage of that too is it addresses side by side. So you could have different applications that use different versions of the same package. We found in like there have been times, for example, the one downside of a global model is because of the way dependencies work in .NET in general. Sometimes you can have a conflict in the local folder, and just Scriptcs will start that. So,
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thought was something like the way Python works with pip, where you pip install it, and then you're just including it at the start of your REPL wherever you're at.
sure. We kind of looked at NPM and followed like NPM and global modules, which are more like CLI tools.
Yeah, makes sense.
Right. So to reiterate what was said, there is a global folder that's used for modules. It's not recommended for loading scripts. You want to usually just install the package that you're using in each script folder that you're writing. So if we actually look at the references now, after I've reset the REPL, it doesn't add in newtonsoft.json anymore. And I talked to Adam and Philip yesterday, and this seems like a bug. So in the spirit of .NET Unboxed and open source, we're actually going to file this as an issue against Scriptcs. Now I haven't looked into it, into what's exactly causing it or what the fix would be. What would be really interesting to me is if this actually gets labeled as a UTakeIt ticket. So depending on what's all involved, it may be a UTakeIt ticket. So maybe somebody in the audience today can actually work on this and contribute it back. So I'm just going to create a new issue, assuming my internet is working. And we'll say it is reset, does not add references from Scriptcs packages. And so we'll add a screenshot of what's actually happening. We'll say that Newtonsoft is missing from references after the reset. All right, looks good. So we're actually going to submit this issue. Like I said, maybe one of us will be able to fix it. So clear that, or get out and then clear that. What's also interesting about the using scriptcs-install and scriptcs packages is you can actually now bundle up your package, your folder with packages.config and your script files and give it to somebody else, and they can just run scriptcs-install and it'll automatically restore those packages. You don't actually have to pass the binaries around with your script.
Much like NPM.
Right. Another way of sharing scripts.
And that was the we really followed
I like that.
Yep. Yeah, that's one of the things from Scriptcs that does, you'll notice that from Node, some of the influences that come from Node and other scripting languages. So loading other scripts from other files. So this is another way of code reuse or code sharing, or just actually splitting your code up in a maintainable manner, is being able to load other files. So you see on the left side, I have calculator.csx, which is just a class, and this is a valid CSX script. I can run this. It won't have any output. It won't actually do anything, but it does compile. And on the right side, I have main.csx, which actually loads calculator.csx, and then I can call it and say, create a new calculator and call the add method and the subtract method. And what's interesting about this is actually in Visual Studio Code, and I'm assuming Atom, I haven't gotten Atom set up yet. You actually get OmniSharp support across the different files. So when this loads, you can actually see, if I zoom in a little bit and get rid of the sidebar, the calculator has two references. And if you go look at the methods, it'll actually go across the files and say, hey, you call add here and you call subtract, and you can jump to them. And if I run main.csx, it should just print out 4 and 2 in some order. Or it failed. Cannot read keys. Oh, because I added the read key for debugging. So speaking of debugging, there is a debugging story with Scriptcs, and there are instructions on the wiki how you can actually hook into Visual Studio and have your script hosted and have breakpoints. I got it to work once, and then I can't remember. Like it seems if I follow the instructions, like I always miss a step or I do something wrong. So Glenn's actually got a upcoming feature. This isn't in the dev branch yet, but I've managed to get it working on my local, and I was going to show it real quick. So if you do need to debug a script, question?
Yeah, on the loading stuff, does it work recursively? Where you load a file that loads other files?
Yep, so whenever you load a file, it's just executing that script in the context of the other script, so it'll keep doing it. So if one file loads another, it'll keep loading, and it'll keep.
It's smart, so if it sees the same file loaded multiple times, it's not going to.
So like requiring got it.
So if I use SVM to see my versions, I have a install code called OpenIDE, and I will use it and start the REPL. And if we check help now, there's a new REPL command, and this is the new feature that Glenn's working on. It's in the middle, it's called OpenIDE. If I say OpenIDE and then the name of the file, main CSX, it's actually going to create a solution file and launch the scripts into it so that you can debug from Visual Studio. So you see I get both of my scripts, I get main and I get the calculator. And if I only want to debug the subtract because it's broken for some reason, I can put my breakpoint there and hit start. And it's actually going to run Scriptcs calling the main CSX script file, which loads the other one. And then I can actually look in and see the value of first is 4 and the value of second is 2. I can step out of it and then you go back down. Yeah, so you see it outputs on the screen 4 and 2. So if you needed to debug your scripts, this is a way you can do it. Like I said, upcoming feature, being able to launch Visual Studio for debugging purposes with your scripts. So that was pretty neat to get working yesterday, to be able to show it off today. I did. I was running it against random demos that I had for today, and it didn't work if you were using a script pack or if you had Scriptcs packages installed. So, but it does now. We did get that fixed. So speaking of script packs you can kind of think of as plugins for Scriptcs. What they do is make it easy for you to work with frameworks inside of Scriptcs. So they bootstrap classes and the script environment. It saves you a lot of time. The most famous example is scriptcs.nancy, at least famous to me, because it allows you to run a Nancy web server in one line of Scriptcs. And the way that works is, if I find Visual Studio Code again, or I lost it. If I reopen Visual Studio Code, just open the complete one. And zoom. All right, so this is one line of Scriptcs using the Nancy script pack. which actually runs a Nancy server. So the syntax for Scriptcs is this require method, the name of the pack you've installed from, and you just install it from NuGet using scriptcs-install. It's all using the same syntax and methods. And this require Nancy pack method actually returns the script pack context, which has all of the code needed to set up the framework and run it. And we're actually here just saying, hey, I want to get route whenever you hit get on the root URL, print out hello world. So this is code you don't have to write to get Nancy working. And you can do more complex examples. Like you can do actually capture the variable and then set up a couple routes, maybe do some put requests, write full-fledged controllers or modules.
I think you can even chain them.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you can chain them. It's fluent. I was just like splitting them up onto separate statements while I was doing the demo. But yeah, you can definitely chain them. And if we run this, I'll just go to Nancy complete so I don't have to download the script pack again. So we just run scriptcs and we'll run the first one, app.csx. So the script pack, I actually went and did some counting. It's, I think it's maybe 10, a dozen files in the script pack solution. And it's about 800 lines of code for the script pack to work. And that's code you didn't have to write to get Nancy working with scriptcs. So if we go now and hit, localhost 888, hello world, hello unboxed. So that's Nancy running from my machine and one line of scriptcs. So that's kind of the power of script packs that you can use with scriptcs. And there are other ones. Fluent Automation's one I like. It's a Fluent style UI testing framework, similar to Canopy for F#. There was a talk on that yesterday. It's a wrapper around Selenium where you can write Fluent style UI tests. So using that in scriptcs as a script pack. Script packs still require you to actually go into Visual Studio to author them. It's a full solution and project that you have to build and put out. Script libraries is something that's pretty recent. This was released this year. And they're very similar to script packs, but they're much lighter. You just have a CSX file with the word main at the end of the whatever you want to call it. So in this case, I've taken the OctoKit script pack that someone has written, and it was only 3 methods, so it wasn't an 800-line script pack. It was just 3 methods in the script pack to be able to interact with GitHub's API wrapper. So I just took those 3 methods out, put them into a script called OctoKit library main, and then you package that in a NuGet package under content scriptcs. And then you install that, and scriptcs will find that in the content folder, content scriptcs folder, and automatically, if you have more than one, it'll pull them all together into a script libraries file that gets loaded every time you run. So no Visual Studio required for script libraries. You just have to write your script and package them the right way, and then you can publish them. And this is actually published now. If you go out to NuGet, you can install OctoKit library, or scriptcs OctoKit library. Now let's shut down Nancy for a minute. Yeah, so I've got GitHub as an example. And if you want to use it, so if you notice here, I'm just calling new OctoKit library. So there's no require keyword or method anymore. I'm just doing up an object. So OctoKit library. And it doesn't have main on the end. It's some magic that scriptcs does on the back end that puts a wrapper class around what you had in that script. I think I should actually be able to see it. So if you open the scriptcs packages folder, you can see the file that it creates. And it hoists any using statements you have up to the top outside of the class. So you notice the script I had before had using OctoKit in 3 methods, so it separates those out. And then it creates OctoKit library and then tells you with a preprocessor directive that this is coming from line 3 of this file. And it's just those 3 methods that I pasted in.
The reason those processor directives are there, that's what allows debugging to work. Actually, big kudos to Kevin on the Rousseau team, because we had no debugging story until he told us, hey, if you can, as part of your preprocessing, write these line directives, debugging might work. And that was like a unique
So using this, you can see it's pull my name from GitHub and then some recent events. So I've done an issue event recently and push in a couple creates. So script libraries are, like I said, relatively new, lighter weight than script packs, and another way that you can share scripts with other people, or script libraries with other people. Modules are a way of either modifying, replacing, or introducing new services into Scriptcs. So if you don't like the script engine is using, so which is right now the Rousseau script engine, you can replace it with the Mono script engine or the F# script engine. Visual Basic is an option, and I saw the other day that Philip has actually written an LOL code script engine. I haven't tried it yet, but if you want to write LOL code for Scriptcs, you can. You can also use scriptcs.packet, which will replace the NuGet functionality with packet functionality, so you can use packet instead. And you can add custom line processors. So we've seen pound load, pound R, the pound line. You can actually add in custom line processors and custom REPL commands. So we saw OpenIDE reset. If you want to add in something that did something specific for your purposes, you could write your own. And that was actually, this was one of the bugs I found. This was the bug I found when I was doing my presentation a year and a half ago. I was trying to write a custom line processor and I couldn't get it to work. Because if you look on Stack Overflow, there's a question about modules and line processors, and this was an example that was given, is write a pound gist that you can give it a gist ID on GitHub and it will download the scripts from it and execute them. I thought that was a cool idea to try out, and I went to find it, and it didn't exist. It was just an idea. So I was going to do that for my presentation. So writing a custom line processor is as simple as implementing or inheriting from a class, giving it a name, and then overriding the process line, which gives you access to the current parser, the current file context, and what line it is. So you can actually pull the arguments out of it. So I'm just pulling a gist ID, a list of files from that gist, and then each one I'm just saying, take this file and parse it in the current context. I can go ahead and do that demo real quick. We got a little bit of time. I'll go into modules complete so I don't have to install anything, and go ahead and remove the current folder. And open. So if we go back and look, so this is the actual gist I'm going to use for the demo. It's got multiple files in it, so it's got a README that it should be ignored. It's got hello.csx, which is going to print hello from the gist URL. It's got a script that creates a class, and it's got a script that says Tutscenes, which is Dutch for goodbye, and one of the variations of goodbye that actually comes lower alphabetically. So I wanted it to print last. So if I go in to modules and zoom, you can see that I've got pound gist, and then I'm going to actually use the class pinger, which is defined in the gist file, and then I'll print done. I need to run this from the command line and not Visual Studio Code because I actually need to tell it what module to use. So you do -modules and then give it the name. That's how you load a module while you're running. So this is going to load the gist module, which includes the preprocessor directive and actual REPL command for it. So it's actually going out to GitHub now, downloading those files and parsing them into the script context and executing.
You can also register modules that will run all the time. So if you wanted to have a module that just every time it sees, for example, like F#, for example, we have an F# function that looks for the FS extension. So you can have modules that will run all the extensions.
Right, when you define your module, you actually give it the name of the module and then what extensions it runs as. So something Glenn was mentioning is, so if you're using the F# module, you would use the FSX extension there and it would automatically pick that up. And then for when you're swapping out whatever classes or registering new classes, you have access to the module configuration, where you can call a line processor and add the new one, which is mine, or if you're swapping out the script engine, there's a bunch of helper methods that allow you to do that. So this is the 2 classes that you need to implement for the module I wrote. And I've got about 5 minutes, so I'm probably going to finish right on time. So hosting was the last thing I wanted to mention because it's the thing I've been playing with the most recently with Scriptcs. It allows you to build an application that has Scriptcs embedded in it. So you can execute scripts from your application, but you can also extend your application and actually bootstrap that environment. So if I wanted to, as my example, look at Fluent Automation, and I want to write an application that allows me to execute Fluent Automation scripts. So this is using the Fluent Automation script pack, where I've got some setup code, right? I've got to say require F14N, and I've got to tell it to use Chrome and set up some Selenium options. And then I also have to say test.run, give it a name, and now I've got this Lambda expression with I, so I can write I open the Knockout demo website, I select some text, I click boxes, or I click buttons, and I expect certain things to happen. But what if I wanted to only use lines 11 to 31? I want really lightweight scripts. I don't want to have to do this setup code every time. There's a couple of good blog posts that have come out recently. I've got this one linked here. It's actually about how to create a script executor and get the scripting engine embedded in your application. So there's a little bit of setup code that you do, but then you tell it, I want to use the Rousseau script engine versus something else, versus Visual Basic or Mono. But then you actually add references to the classes you want added. So these may be classes that are specific to your application or to Fluent Automator in this case. So I'm automatically adding the references to Fluent Automator and Selenium. I'm automatically importing the namespaces and passing in that Fluent Automation script pack. And then I have an execute method, which I pass in a string, which is just the script to execute. And then just as an example, my application program file is taking in a script file that is the very slimmed down Fluent Automation and wrapping that setup code around it. So the setting up the script pack, it's actually using the script name as the test name, and then it's taking the contents of the script I'm passing into it and putting it into this string to pass it to the executor. And then I end up with a script for Fluent Automation that actually looks like this now. So no setup code, just directly, I open something, I select something, and I verify that my website is working correctly. So if we jump quickly into hosting, actually from here, so you'll see I have this script. It's called hosted test CSX, and it's the same one from the screenshot. And I've got this application from the screenshots running. I've got debug set up to automatically call and pass in the name of that, or actually the path of that script to it. So if I start debugging, it should actually create the script host, pull the contents of that script CSX file, and then start executing it with the Fluent Automation code injected around it. So it's going to run through the knockout test real quick. So now I can write multiple tests this way. I don't have to write setup code for each one, and I can write this in this application that way. And that's just one example of hosting. Philip mentioned Bow yesterday, which is Adam's project for writing Scriptcs build task, and it uses the hosting engine to do that. So anything that you could think of to make your application scriptable, you could use the hosting engine for. And that's actually all of the demos and the content that I think I hit everything in the time allotted, so that was really quick. Any questions before time is officially up?
Yeah, what use cases do you find are like great nails for the Scriptcs hammer?
Like I said, the main ones I use are for automating tasks. If I just have something that I need to run over and over and I don't want the bloat of a Visual Studio project for a 5-line or a 10-line script, or writing a simple script just to test out something new. A great use case is, and this is actually how I found out about Scriptcs, was through Octopus Deploy, which is an automated deployment system for .NET applications. You can use PowerShell to write your deployment scripts, but you can also write C# deployment scripts. So if you're not comfortable with PowerShell enough to write a deployment script, but you are with C#, you can write a deployment script in Scriptcs, and Octopus will execute that as part of your deployment. So that's a pretty cool use of it. Cool, thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
So I noticed that you could install it via homebrew. Is it fully supported on Mac?
Oh yeah, right now it's still using the Mono engine, right? Until Roslyn supported all the way on Mac. But yeah, it'll use the Mono engine on Mac. You can install it through Homebrew and you can start using it immediately. There's actually shebang support, so you can write your scripts with shebang at the top and execute them.
Can you do anything on Linux as well?
It works on Linux.
Works on Linux.
Just want to point out that SVM is cross-platform.
Oh, yes, so,
Brew is just for Mac, I think.
right, so Brew's for installing on Mac, Chocolatey on Windows, but SVM is cross-platform, so definitely look at SVM for installing. Cool. Any more questions? Awesome. Thank you, guys.